All right. Hi there, Nikki and Nigel, and yeah, to all our viewers, we'll be starting our webinar shortly. I'm just seeing all the viewers coming online now. We're almost up to 100 there, which is great to see. Yeah, and as soon as we get to a significant number, I'll start with the introduction. In fact, it's actually filling up very quickly, so we'll go ahead and start. So yeah, good day everyone. A big hello from Nikki and Nigel and myself. We're super excited to see that so many of you could join us once again for one of our special Dream Destination webinars. This week we're off to a far-flung portion of Europe, namely the countries of Georgia and Armenia. Some of you might even wonder where those countries are, and I know Nigel will be touching on this during his webinar shortly. Georgia and Armenia have a rich history and are extremely significant from a Western Palearctic perspective, as this is one of the few locations within the WP listing region, should I say, where one can see a few otherwise Asian species. Again, Nigel will be touching on the term Western Palearctic during his talk, if any of you are unfamiliar with the region. So the regions of Georgia and Armenia are also rich from a gastronomy point of view, and the habitats that we explore are scenically breathtaking, and there's a number of really unique birds around as well. And needless to say, Nikki and I are really looking forward to this one. So I have the great pleasure of introducing to you all Nigel Redman, your presenter for today's webinar, and no stranger to those of you who tuned into our webinar on Ethiopia back in August last year. Nigel lives in Norfolk in the UK and has been obsessed with birds for as long as he can remember. He had a successful career as a publisher of bird books, but an even longer one as a bird tour leader. In fact, Nigel has been leading birding tours for the past 3 decades, with over 120 tours under the belt, and has explored over 80 countries on all 7 continents. Nigel's travels have frequently involved getting off the beaten track, beginning in the late 1970s when he traveled the overland hippie trail to Kathmandu in search of exotic Asian birds. Since then, he's led pioneering expeditions to a wide variety of places, including Serbia, Central Asia, Yemen, Bhutan, Indonesia, and Ethiopia. In 1992, Nigel also led the first ever birding tour to West Papua, which was formerly Eritrea. And in 2012, he took an intrepid birding group to northern Somalia. These days, Nigel spends most of his time guiding for Rockjumper across Africa, Asia, and Europe, but also spends time guiding on board cruise vessels bound for Antarctica and the Arctic. Finally, Nigel's adventures have given him an in-depth field experience with over half the world's birds having been seen. Yeah, and before we start, just a reminder that we love fielding your questions. If you do have a question or you want to just say hi, please use the chat function or the Q&A box, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end with Nigel and Nikki. And on that note, over to you, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Keith, for that lovely introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be here, although I'm sorry not to actually see you all. But today I'm going to be introducing you to one of Rockjumper's newer destinations, the little tiny countries of Georgia and Armenia, which are situated in the Caucasus Mountains. Were it not for COVID, I should actually be in Armenia at this very moment. But today, instead, I'm going to be conducting a virtual tour there with a much larger group than usual. But hopefully you'll all get a few virtual endemics today and an insight into a really wonderful part of the world. So what shall I cover in my talk to you today? The first thing is, where's that? Where are Georgia and Armenia? Many people ask that. So I will give you an insight as to where the countries are located. I'll talk a little bit about the geography and the history of Georgia and Armenia. I'll also run through the reasons for visiting Georgia, Armenia, and the best time to go, a little bit about the habitats, a little bit about the ornithological highlights, and then I shall run through the Rockjumper tour, the itinerary of our tour there, and where we can expect to see around 220 species. So looking at this map, this is a map, it says it's a map of Europe, and in fact it's really pretty much a map of the Western Palearctic. So for those of you that can see the little arrow, the Europe runs through the Mediterranean. So anything to the north of the Mediterranean is Europe. The Western Palearctic includes North Africa as well, and the Western Palearctic also includes certain places in the Middle East, and then runs up the Ural Mountains in Russia. So this chunk of Russia here is all part of Europe. The little countries in the Caucasus are all part of Europe. Turkey is not officially Europe except for that little bit there, but pretty much everything on this map is the Western Palearctic. So to move on to the next map, let's zoom in. This is the Caucasus region. So you've got the Black Sea on the left and the Caspian Sea on the right. And you can see the Caucasus Mountains running through here from the northwest to southeast. So up here in Russia and Georgia, you've got the Greater Caucasus Mountains. They're in Russia, Georgia, and also a little bit in Azerbaijan. And then the Lesser Caucasus, these range down here to the south, which are mainly in Georgia and Armenia, little tiny bit into Turkey as well. You've got a couple of big significant lakes here as well. You've got, this is Lake Sevan in the middle of Armenia. This is Lake Van in Turkey. And on to the next slide. Now, Armenia is a smallish country at the moment, but it used to be much bigger. It's been not dealt a good hand by history, but all three countries have belonged to other empires in the past. Most recently, the Ottoman Empire, and more recently that, the Soviet Union. Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan were formerly republics of the Soviet Union until 1991, when they gained their independence. But longer ago than that, Armenia was a much bigger country. And that Western Armenia there was seized by Turkey at the early part of the 20th century, after the dreadful genocide that happened after the First World War. So Armenia now is just that little small country there. You've got this area here of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is now currently part of Azerbaijan. And Nakhchivan here in yellow is also part of Azerbaijan. This little piece up here, up in the north, is now part of Georgia, but it used to be Armenia once. So Armenia now is a much smaller country than it used to be. So this is another map showing the present day arrangement. So Georgia is this bit in green. This part here, number 11, is significant in as much that it has been autonomous in the past, but it's part of Georgia today. And these areas here, number 9 and 10, they were seized by the Russians in a recent invasion, and they are being disputed territory. They should be part of Georgia, but they're sort of Russian held at the moment. We don't go to those parts, of course. And then down here, this is Armenia in blue. The area here in Nagorno-Karabakh is the area which has been disputed, has been occupied by Armenians until quite recently, but now is firmly controlled by Azerbaijan. I should also say that Georgia and Armenia are both Christian countries, and Azerbaijan is a Muslim country. So moving on to the next slide. Why visit Georgia and Armenia? Well, it's got several endemics and near endemics. That's always a good reason to go somewhere. And I'll run through those in a minute. It's also got a number of species that are difficult to see elsewhere, and especially if you're interested in the Western Palearctic, because the Caucasus is situated right on the fringe of the Western Palearctic and the fringe of Europe. So you can get species here which are pretty hard or impossible to see elsewhere in that region. It's also on a major migration flyway between Eurasia and Africa. Wintering birds breeding in Eurasia, winter in Africa, pass through the Caucasus. And in spring and autumn, that can be pretty impressive. It's got spectacular scenery, a good variety of habitats. I'll run through that as well. It's great for wildflowers and butterflies as well as birds. And we will look at some of those as well. I'll show you some orchids and a few flowers. And our tour can expect to see around 40 species of butterflies. So that's not bad as well. Keith mentioned about the ancient cultures with historic churches, both Both countries have ancient churches. There's the Armenian Apostolic Church and the Georgian Orthodox Church. They both go back a long way, and both countries have their own alphabets as well. The Armenian alphabet goes back to 405 AD, ancient alphabets. It's also the birthplace of wine, and it has amazing cuisine. But both countries claim to have invented wine, but I think Georgia just about tips it. And the winemaking goes back to 6000 BC is the earliest evidence of wine being produced in Georgia. And Armenia is the home of the world's oldest known winery, which dates back to 4100 BC. And they're making some impression on the wine these days. In Georgia especially, wine is being marketed quite heavily, and you can get some very, very fine wines in Georgia now. And the accommodations are good, always useful for a tour there. Perfectly adequate and pretty good in many places. So when to visit Georgia and Armenia? Well, spring is the time to go. The trick, though, with visiting these areas is that early spring is best. It's best to go to Georgia in early spring and late spring in Armenia. This is because in Georgia we're visiting the high Caucasus, so the much higher altitudes, and the birds that we want to see there breed up at the snow line. But the earlier you go, before they are actually starting to nest, you can see them lower down, and it saves having to climb up to the snow line, which is always a good thing. But in Armenia, there are some of the breeding visitors there only arrive back quite late. And one of them, the pale rockfinch, is a really late bird that often doesn't get back to the end of May or even early June. And we don't usually get the pale rockfinch on our tours. But other late ones like grey-neck bunting and Upchur's warblers are usually just getting back at the end of our tour. So that's why we do Georgia first and Armenia second. If you wanted raptor migration, you go to Batumi in western Georgia on the Black Sea coast in autumn, and that's fabulous. We don't offer a tour there yet, but maybe we will one day. But more than 1 million raptors pass through Batumi each autumn between August and October. The main habitats that we visit, we do high mountain slopes above the tree line, which are mostly drivable. We do a little bit of coniferous forest, but not very much. We do some lush deciduous forests in Armenia, mostly in the northern parts of Armenia. And these are fabulous. They're all just bursting into leaf when we're there and alive with birdsong, and they're delightful. And the flowers are fabulous too. We do the dry rolling steppes of southern Georgia, and the central plateau of Armenia is much the same sort of habitat as well. And then down in the south of Armenia, dry, rocky, juniper-clad hillsides have some special warblers and wheatears in them, and we will be working those habitats too. Lakes and rivers, of course. We don't usually visit Lake Sevan, the great big lake in the center of Armenia. That's got breeding colonies of Armenian gull, but we can see that gull easily enough elsewhere. And there's a few interesting rivers that we see. And then the extensive wetlands, which is really mainly the fish ponds at Armash, which are world famous and a fabulous area. So the ornithological highlights, I shall show you photographs of pretty much all of these birds. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but the endemics are Caucasian grouse and Caucasian snowcock are the two top endemics in the high Caucasus. The Caspian snowcock is a near endemic, which we'll see in Armenia if we're lucky. The Armenian gull is easy to see, and it's a near endemic. The mountain chiffchaff has a near endemic race, the other race being found in the Western Himalayas or in Pakistan. And sometimes the Caucasian race is sometimes split, but that's a near endemic race. The green warbler is a near endemic, also found a little bit in Turkey and in northern Iran. And the great rosefinch is an endemic race which has been split sometimes, and it's the bright race, the better looking one. It's much brighter than the Himalayan forms. So those are some of the good birds. I mentioned about it being a good migration route. These are the main routes, which are often by the bigger birds, raptors especially, who are looking for short sea crossings. But you've got major routes going from Africa into Spain, another one that goes up through Tunisia into Italy. But this big route that goes through the Middle East in green here. And if you look at this this main route here, this route here, sorry, I've gone on, clicked too far. This route goes right through the Caucasus. It's the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So this major route goes through the Caucasus, and a lot of these birds will filter through the valleys that cut through the Caucasus, and we will go up one of those valleys. So I mentioned about wine. Well, Georgian wine is pretty good, and if you want to, we'll get a chance to try some of it. It's always a highlight, I think. The food is fabulous. Keith mentioned that too. These are just some dishes that were photographed on one of my tours. They're always beautifully presented and absolutely delicious, fairly Middle Eastern influence, but distinct cuisine in both Georgia and Armenia. And the bread is terrific. This is a bakery that we went to in Armenia on my last tour, and it's really terrific. Fabulous bread, best eaten hot. This was a field banquet we had in Georgia once. Don't do that every time, but always a treat if we have one of those. So this is just a map showing the region and where we go. So up in the top, you've got the Greater Caucasus, that line of white peaks there, the Lesser Caucasus down here. So Georgia is the northern bit there. Tbilisi is the capital of Georgia. Kazbegi is the place where we spend most of our time in Georgia. Lake Jandari is a lake on the Azerbaijan border, and we visit a monastery nearby as well. That's in the steppe country. Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. We visit, well, we do Mount Aragats at the end, which is the tallest mountain in Armenia. Dilijan is an area of deciduous woodland in northern Armenia. Armash is the fish ponds area, and Vedi Hills are some dry hills nearby, which we usually do at the same time, often in the same day. Yerevan is usually just a stopover site, but it gives you access to a number of different habitats that we can visit. And Mehri down the south is right on the Iranian border, and that's got a few special birds, and we usually go down there as well. So that's our itinerary. Let's head straight into it. Capital of Georgia is Tbilisi, and it's a very pretty capital city. It's not very big. 1 million people at the most, I think. Georgia's only got 4 million people in total, so it's quite a small country, and Armenia's only got 3 million. So this is a view from, I think it's from one of our hotels in Tbilisi. It's quite a hilly city, goes up and down. And one of the things we do in Tbilisi, or one of the first birding that we do in Tbilisi, is go to the botanical gardens. It really is one of the most scenic botanical gardens I've been to, and I haven't got a photograph of it, but it's very hilly, and it's got lots of trees, and it's got a river running through it as well. And here we might see our first red-breasted flycatchers. Often the red-breasted flycatchers will look like this. But this is a female, or possibly a first summer male. But the smart males look like this, and they're a delightful little flycatcher. And we often find migrant birds when we're on the tour, or even breeding birds in the deciduous woodlands in Armenia. Dipper, white-throated dipper, breeds on the little stream that runs through the botanical gardens, so we should see that. And if we're lucky, we might even pick up a day-roosting Eurasian scops owl. This one wasn't actually photographed in the gardens, but we've had it in the gardens before. This one was actually photographed in Armenia. But it's always easier to find these owls in daytime rather than at night. So moving on from Tbilisi, we head straight up into the Caucasus. We're going up high, and we follow a valley that goes, it follows the Aragats River. This river valley goes straight up to through the central Caucasus, heading northwards, and it's called, the road that goes up there is called the Georgian Military Highway, built by the Russians, or the Soviets, I should say, to facilitate transport between Georgia and Russia. It used to be a quiet road. It's got a lot busier these days with lots of lorry traffic. But this little church at Ananuri is our first stop. It's a very attractive ancient church. It's quite a touristy site these days, and lots of little tents and souvenir sellers have sprung up around the edge, as you can see there. But we're interested in birds, and here you can find, these are the murals inside the church, ancient church murals, which are really lovely and fascinating to have a look at. But we go to look for some birds and migrants and resident species alike. These common redstarts is likely to be seen here. Interestingly, you get both the nominate migrant common redstarts and the the breeding race Samomysicus. The one on the right, you can see this pale whitish wing panel, which is the distinctive feature of the Samomysicus race, the Middle Eastern race of redstart. So, and I've seen both there. Last time I was there, we actually had a migrant nominate and a resident Samomysicus. We might also see something like an ortolan bunting, another migrant bird here. They do breed in the region, but this one was a migrant. I'm sure there was a little flock of them, and they weren't in breeding habitat. So as we climb up through the valley, the scenery gets more and more spectacular. This is looking back down the Aragats Valley from quite close to the Javari Pass at the top. And that building on the left there, that really ugly building, and it's enormous when you get right up close to it, is called the Georgian-Russian Friendship Monument, built in the Soviet times. It's a monstrosity, but it's a great place it gives you a great vantage point, and you can see alpine center from it, and red-billed choughs and alpine choughs. You can see actually just from the monument itself. This is an alpine center. These breed very high up on the snow line. When we get to Kazbegi, you've got to climb pretty high to see one of these, but at that monument, you can get them at eye level. That valley, because it cuts right through the Caucasus, it's a terrific migration route, and raptors especially. You can get large numbers of raptors passing through if you go on a good day. Often these include black kite, European, honey buzzards, and steppe eagles, and a variety of other species are possible too. Steppe buzzards, of course, is possible. Yes, you can get some good raptors passing through. There are also resident raptors in the area, like griffon vultures and black vulture, golden eagle, and even lammergeier. So this is the Javari Pass. It used to be known in Soviet times as the Krestovi Pass. It's at 2,400 meters. And this photo was taken sort of in late May, when it's quite grassy and green, and looks quite nice, and you can wander around. That's what it looked like last time I was there. It was quite snowy, but you don't spend a lot of time there. We just drive over it, and on the other side, it's all easy again. So this is Javari Pass. This is a photograph, an old photograph that I took on my first visit in 1983. And you get sheep migration. The shepherds are taking their sheep to higher pastures, and it used to cause some quite serious traffic jams. This is another one from 1983. And it used to be quite difficult to get through. These days it's lorries. You don't see so many sheep on the road, but there are more lorries than there used to be. And Kazbegi is our destination. Kazbegi lies at 1,800 meters, and that's Kazbegi down in the valley bottom, and that's where we stay for three nights. We have a comfortable hotel there. You can see a rock where Wallcreepers breed from the hotel. So this is actually looking eastwards from the western side of Kazbegi. And if you look at that little piece of wood there, so there's a plantation there, and behind that, that's a snowcock gully up there. That's where we look for snowcocks. We can drive right up to the top of the woods, and we can usually scope the snowcocks without having to climb. Sometimes we've had to climb up here, but the snow was quite low on when I took this photograph, and so we didn't do that. And looking in the other direction, this is taken from that other side that I just showed you, and you can see the Güldenstädt Trinity Church, which is where the previous photograph was taken from, is there. And this is Mount Kazbek, and this is the tallest peak in the Central Caucasus, a beautiful peak. It's at 5,000 meters, this peak. And on a clear day like this, it's beautiful. So you can see some more woodlands that we can explore here. These are woodlands and scrubby areas above them. We go to all those, and there's a drivable road up to Trinity Church here too. So we start off in the valley bottom, and the scrub in the valley bottom, this is buckthorn scrub. It's a good habitat. As you can see, it's early spring. There are not many wildflowers out. If you go a month later, the area is full of beautiful alpine flowers. But at this time of the year, it's looking quite wintry still. The snow has not long melted from these higher areas. But these buckthorn bushes are often good for migrants. You get a variety of warblers. Common things are like the willow warbler. Willow warbler is one of the world's great migrants. Some of them breed from extreme northeastern Siberia and winter in southern Africa. It's an incredibly long migration. So these are common migrants at this time of year. We'll be looking for this though. This is the mountain chiffchaff of the Caucasian subspecies. It's brown. Most of our warblers are brown. And they're really lovely. They're not like the gaudy things that you get in North America. So this is a mountain chiffchaff, which is brown, not much relieving it. The common chiffchaff is also seen sometimes as a migrant in this area, and it's more olive and with yellowish, a little bit of yellowish tones on the underneath as well. So these breed in the forests around Kazbegi, although when we're there, sometimes it's only the first ones are just arriving. And we can also see sometimes these mountain chiffchaffs, we sometimes see them in the botanical gardens in Tbilisi where they haven't quite got up to higher altitudes yet. Rock bunting is another bird that we can see up there. This is a resident species, just only moves a little bit altitudinally probably, but this is a breeding bird around Kazbegi. Wagtails, well, these are white wagtails. That's a common species throughout the Tor. We see this in small numbers. We also see yellow wagtails, migrant yellow wagtails, mostly of the nominate flava or Tumbergi races. Sometimes you can see a luteer, which is the yellow-headed, and down in Armenia we'll see black-headed, the black-headed race Feldegg. But this is a good one. This is a citrine wagtail. Saw this in Kazbegi on my last tour, and I have seen it occasionally in Armenia too. But it's an uncommon bird in this part of the world, and this will be a migrant that's passing through. Water pipit is the common pipit and probably the commonest passerine, in fact, in the area. On the steep slopes around Kazbegi, there are water pipits everywhere. It's the familiar song and sight of the area. And the race in the Caucasus is Kuteli, which is a distinct race and makes it an interesting bird to see. Red-throated pipit, on the other hand, is a migrant, so it's passing through. And we usually connect with one or two of these as they're migrating north, and they go a long way north. A lot of those breed on the tundra of northern Eurasia. Ring ouzel is another bird that is fairly common around Kazbegi, and the race again here, Amicorum, is a very distinctive race with a lot of white in the wing. The ring ouzels that we have in Britain have much less white in the wing, but they all have the big white necklace. And one of the big prizes is Güldenstadt's Redstart. This is a male. This is a fabulous Redstart. It's a really big Redstart with this huge white wing patch and the white crown. It occurs in the Himalayas, a couple of different races in the Himalayas, but the race in the Caucasus is an endemic race. I don't think it's ever been proposed as a split, but this is a bird that breeds right up high on the snow line. But we usually find it lower down in the buckthorn bushes because it hasn't started breeding yet, and so they're easier to find that way. And then the other big prize in the passerine line is the great snowfinch. This already, even at the end of April, when we usually are in Georgia, this will be right up on the snow line, and it's quite a slog to get up to the areas where they breed. But what we really hope for is perhaps a little bit of overnight snow. And this photograph was taken just after we'd had a snowfall during the night, just a light scattering, as you can see. And in the morning, the bushes, these buckthorn bushes at the bottom of the slopes were alive with rose finches and other things too. This is a male. The female is brown, but still lovely. And this is another photograph taken by somebody who came on one of my tours a few years ago when there was no snow around, but a particularly fabulous photograph indeed, taken by Paul. Twite is a small finch. Brevirostris is a Caucasian race of the twite. We have twite in Britain, and they occur quite widely, but the Caucasian race is a bit more special. It's got heavier markings on the breast and a little bit paler around the head. So this is a twite. And white-winged snowfinch, which sometimes takes a little bit of finding. Again, this is quite a widespread species, occurs from the Alps right through to China and the Himalayas. Black redstart also is another widespread species, but the Middle Eastern races have this rufous belly. The birds we see in Western Europe and Britain are grey, blackish grey on the belly. But the Middle Eastern races are rufous. This one is Ocurus, which is the nominate race. And red-fronted serin. Red-fronted serin is a lovely little finch, often in large flocks on these high mountain slopes. And we should connect with quite a few of these. It's an easy bird to find. The adults look are almost the same, and it's a very gorgeous little finch with this red patch on the forehead. I mentioned about the wildflowers. I haven't got very many flower pictures, but they are terrific. Not so much in Georgia, we're a bit early, but in Armenia, we'll see some lovely flowers. We'll see a variety of irises, we see poppies, we see gentians, we see these giant marsh marigolds on the left. You can see that they're the first flowers to come out. Everywhere else is all still brown and flattened by the snows. But as soon as the snow's gone, the marsh marigolds come out. And then these wonderful crocuses, these ones were actually taken on Mount Aragats in Armenia, which pop up from the bare ground high above the tree line. The special birds of Kazbegi, Wallcreeper. Wallcreeper is a sought after bird. I think it might even be my favorite bird. It's just a wonderful, wonderful bird. And it has these broad wings in flight, flashing loads of red with this sort of butterfly-like flight. And it inhabits very high altitude places in summer, but comes lower often in winter. This is a female or possibly a winter male, but the males develop a black throat in breeding season. And we know of 2 or 3 sites around Kazbegi where this can be seen, and there's even one site that is actually visible from the hotel. So that's a target bird. The Caucasian grouse is a top bird to get. Not an easy one to photograph. The photograph on the inset there is a more typical view. We'll see them in all probability on the steep, they like the steep bare slopes below the snow line, where they will lek and display, but it's hard to get close to them, but they have a very distinctive outline when you see them. The main bird in the photograph was taken by my friend Vasil, who's an Armenian ornithologist, and that's a male, but it's not in full plumage yet. It's just molting into its full plumage, and I've never seen one quite that close. And the other top bird to get there is the Caucasian snowcock. We'll see them, and we see them reasonably well with scope views. That's a hard bird to photograph unless you climb very high, I suppose. But the Caucasian snowcock is a top target, and well, you can even hear them from the hotel calling sometimes. They have a wonderful curlew-like call that echoes down through the valleys of the highest slopes. lammergeier, or bearded vulture, I mentioned before. It's a widespread bird of prey, occurs quite widely through Africa and Asia. Never very common, but we always see it in the Caucasus in Georgia. It's a wonderful bird, and this one just was in Kazbegi on my trip before last. And then moving away from the mountains, going down into southern Georgia, we'll hit the steppes, what I call the rolling steppe country of southern Georgia. A very different habitat indeed, much lower in altitude, probably only sort of 400 or 500 meters in altitude. And here we see some different birds. This is a picnic site. This is my favorite picnic site in the steppes that we stop at. Corn buntings are a common bird there. It's a widespread species, sadly declined a lot in Britain these days. Crested lark, another very common species that we'll see widely. But this is a bit more special. This is calandra lark. It's a big chunky lark, as you can see there, with a very stout bill. And it's got little patches black patches on the sides of the breast. But this one was in full display, and how different it looks turned from a brown bird. It's fanned its throat feathers out so to display the black bases of the feathers of the throat patch, and then these black underwing as well, which is a distinctive feature when they're in flight. But it makes for a striking pose. So this is calandra lark. If we're lucky, we'll hit some migration of demoiselle cranes. We had some large flocks on both the last 2 tours that I've done. And these are wonderful birds. These will be heading from their wintering grounds probably in Sudan or anywhere, somewhere in Northeast Africa, and heading up to their breeding grounds in Central Asia. So they're just passing through Armenia. And this is the David Gareja Monastery, another ancient monastery. Some interesting churches that we'll visit on the tour. And this has got caves that have been carved out of the cliff, which you can see there, and some of them still inhabited still. But it's a great little monastery, and we see some nice birds in the area as well. This is the Caucasian agama, which is not a bird, but we'll see those that's crawling around the rocks around the monastery. The common starling, I just put that in because it shows it's a very beautiful bird, which is often just overlooked and ignored. But this is a more special one. This is the rosy starling, or rose-colored starling, and this is a bird that is quite common in southern Georgia and in Armenia, and it often goes around in really big flocks, but they must pair up sometimes to breed. But the rosy starling is a bird to look for. Western rock nuthatch. There are 2 rock nuthatches. We'll come to the eastern later, and sometimes they occur side by side. But at the David Gareja Monastery, it's just western that we would see, and this is a little bit smaller. And you can see the supercilium is of even width in that photograph. You can see that quite well. Whereas in the eastern, the supercilium flares much wider behind the eye. Pied wheatear. It's the only place on the tour where we normally see pied wheatears. It's got a female on the left and a male on the right. And there's a pair that usually breeds in the monastery, which we see. And so that's a bird pretty much on the edge of its range, really. It occurs more north and further east from there, but in Georgia, it just creeps into southern Georgia here. And then finally, near Tbilisi, there's a bit of pine forest where we can see Krupa's nuthatch. We found Krupa's nuthatch on the last trip. This is a speciality of Turkey, really. It occurs from Western Turkey right through to the Caucasus, and Tbilisi is pretty much right at the western edge of its range. So, so this is a good new site for Krupa's nuthatch. So look, going back to this map again, we're now moving down to the Armenian section of it. So we're going to show you photographs of birds from these various places here, and we'll more or less heading north to south, but we'll end up at Mount Aragats. But we'll do the sites pretty much in order, ending up in Negri in the south. So Yerevan is the capital of Armenia, and it's not a big capital. And this is Republic Square, which is the central part of the city, which is all, and this is when it's all lit up at night, which is quite something to see. Northern Armenia is dominated with some lovely deciduous woodlands. This is a nice area of woodland near Hagpat Monastery. Apart from being very pretty, it looks as if it could be in the Lake District in England. It's a lovely area, and you get some good birds in the area like green warbler. Green warbler is a Caucasian near endemic. You can see these up in Kazbegi if you go a bit later, but they haven't quite got there yet, so we always get them in Armenia on this tour. Green warbler is one of is a beautiful little warbler. It's closely related to greenish warbler. It's brighter normally. This is actually not a particularly bright individual. They can be much brighter than this, especially first winter birds, of course, can be quite yellow below. But it has a single wing bar, obviously a supercilium like most Phylloscopus, and a distinctive song. But this likes the deciduous woodlands in Armenia. Semi-collared flycatcher. This is also found here. Again, you can pick up migrants in all sorts of odd places, but they breed in these deciduous woodlands around Hagpat or Dilijan. That's another good area to visit. Hawfinch also can be found much easier to see hawfinches in Europe or in the Caucasus than it is in Britain. But hawfinch is a beautiful bird, huge bill, but almost no song to speak of. It has a little tiny insignificant call note that helps attract attention, but it's not a very vocal species. Woodpeckers, middle spotted, is a target bird we'll be looking for. You can see that in the botanical gardens, even in Tbilisi. But if you don't see it there, they're in the woodlands in Armenia. We usually connect with that. And the Syrian woodpecker on the right there is that's not really in forest. That likes more open areas. So that's in parks, parkland, or even in cities if there are a few big trees around. We'll connect with that in a few places. Eurasian tree creeper. This one's actually nesting in a wall, but that's can be found in these woodlands. And then Armenian gull. This is one of the special birds to look for, but it's usually easy to find. Big colonies around Lake Sevan, but there are smaller colonies elsewhere in Armenia and also in Turkey, in parts of Turkey and into Iran. It's one of these white-headed gulls. It's been split off as a species from the yellow-legged gull. It's got yellow legs. It's subtly different in proportions. It's often got a rounder head, slightly longer legs. These are subtle features, but it usually has some black on the subterminal part of the bill, which you can actually see in that photograph. That is a feature. And in flight, it usually has more black on the wingtips as well. And that shows well in that picture too. So this is Armenian gull. And then Armash fish ponds. I mentioned Armash as being a good, wonderful place to see lots of birds. It's absolutely teeming with birds. It's got ducks, it's got herons, it's got warblers, it's got lots of things. It's got migrants as well. Terrific place. And we spend pretty much a whole day there. In the background, you've got Mount Ararat. The big one on the right is Mount Ararat, and the left it's Little Ararat. These are actually in Turkey. Used to belong to Armenia in the past, but they are Turkey these days. And on a clear day like this, it's a wonderful backdrop to these fish ponds. So white-tailed plover is one of the lovely birds that breeds there. There's a number of pairs breed at Armash. A most elegant plover, white-tailed lapwing, I should say, these days. White-tailed lapwing, beautiful bird. And there's one in flight showing its white tail. Ducks, I mentioned, red-crested potsherds. There are plenty of those. There's a pair there, male on the right, female on the left. One of the top ones to look for is marble duck. Seems to be getting harder to see at the fish ponds, but we'll try hard for it. And white-headed duck is a bird that we can find a few there as well on the fish ponds, the male on the right there. So these are the sort of waterfowl to see. Ruddy shell ducks, quite a few of those as well around. Pygmy cormorants. Pygmy cormorants, very common around Armagh, plenty of those. There's one in flight, top left there. It's a distinctly small species of cormorant, and this is a great place to see them. Little bitterns, they can be seen there, sometimes quite easily. And blue-cheeked bee-eaters is a beautiful bee-eater. We'll see a few pairs of those there, and there's one in flight. White-winged terns, or white-winged black tern as they used to be called. Sometimes there's hundreds there, if not thousands. It can be a really, really common bird. It does breed in the area, but most of them will probably be birds on passage. And then there are warblers. There are lots of warblers at Armagh, and they're all brown. So you've got this one. This is Savi's warbler. You've got moustache, which I haven't got photographs of. You've got great reed. You've got Eurasian reed. You've got paddy field, which is what this one is. And they're lovely. Beautiful. They've all got different songs, and at this time of year they'll all be singing. Reed bunting is a bird that's fairly familiar to European birders, or very familiar to European birders. This race here, Caspia, has a distinctly fatter bill, more swollen bill than other races, which is quite distinctive, and that shows well in this photograph. Bearded reedling, everyone loves those. They're very common at Armagh. We always see quite a few of those. This is a male, and that's a female. And with all those little brown warblers nesting in the reed beds, there's got to be a few common cuckoos who are going to lay their eggs in their nests. So common cuckoos, yep, you always see a few of those. Pratinculls, we get both collared and black-winged pratincull. Common is the commoner of the two. And we usually see some of those at Armagh. And I mentioned about the yellow wagtail. This is the black-headed wagtail, the black-headed form, feldegg, and they breed in the area. Very smart birds indeed. And then the Vedi Hills, which is nearby. Vedi Hills is a completely different area, dry gorge and rocky hillsides here with very little vegetation. Some good birds to be seen in this area. Things like Isabelline wheatear, that's quite a common breeding species. Eastern black-eared wheatear is also quite widespread and common, and very similar to the black-eared wheatear until you get your eye in, really, is the Finch's wheatear. It can be, you've got to see the tail pattern to be certain, or the black of the wing joins to the black on the neck. It tends to be whiter as well than the black-eared, but you've got to look at them quite carefully sometimes. So Finch's wheatear is a good one to see. Upcher's warbler, a late arriving bird. It's a large Hippolaeus warbler, quite distinct from the slightly smaller olivaceous warbler, which can also be found. Rock sparrows, they can be seen here as well. They're striped with their stripy heads. Rock sparrows, always on rocks. And grey-necked bunting. Grey-necked bunting is quite a special bunting, and a late-ish arriving bird, but at Vedi Gorge, you can usually find them on those rocky slopes. Trumpeter finch is also found there, sometimes comes down to drink at the little pools in the gorge. But it's a nomadic species, and sometimes you find it and sometimes you don't. You can also see Mongolian finch there, but that's pretty tough. Not many records, but I have seen it once. And Asian crimson-winged finch is another speciality to look out for as well. So lots of lovely little finches. And surprisingly, this is a new one, that a recent addition to the avifauna of Armenia, desert finch. And it's been seen there quite regularly in Vedi Gorge, but it's a recent arrival. I never used to see it on earlier tours. And I mentioned the pale rock finch. very late arriving, end of May, early June. Vassal once told me that one time they didn't arrive till the second week of July. It's a strange bird, goes around, it's quite nomadic. Even on its wintering grounds, it's unpredictable. Then moving on from Armash, this is the wonderful Arpa Valley, beautiful valley, lovely trees, fast-flowing river, lots of wildflowers, common nightingales singing from the bushes. It's a beautiful valley. Penduline tits, sometimes found they're nesting in the trees by the river. Eurasian bee-eaters, probably mostly passing through, but they do breed as well. I found them breeding on the Georgian Armenian border, right on the border in a little sandy bank. But most of the bee-eaters will be passing through. Shrikes, both red-backed and lesser grey shrikes, and you can also see woodchats too. But they're around and usually fairly common. The delightful little windchat, often breeding quite high up in the hills, the rocky hills of Armenia. This is Karahunj, which is Armenia's version of Stonehenge. It's a great place to stop. It's got fantastic views. It's lovely to have a walk around, and you can see some quite nice birds. I've seen trumpeter finches here, rock sparrows, wheat ears, and all sorts of things. Lesser kestrels. There's a couple of places to look for lesser kestrels. They breed up on the open plateau in central Armenia. Male there, male on the left, female on the right. The central plateau is quite good for things like long-legged buzzard. Usually see a few of those, and even lesser spotted eagle, which may be migrating, but they breed in the woodland areas in northern Armenia. So lesser spotted eagle. I love the orchids. We've got a few here. There's Georgian orchid and punctate orchid, absolutely glorious species of orchids. We just see these by the roadside when we're heading south in Armenia. And monkey orchid and lady orchid, another couple of species that I photographed on my last tour. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful orchids. And then right down the south, this is at Megri, orchards. The orchards of Megri, apricots, pomegranates, lots of other kinds of fruits, even mulberries. That's the main things they grow around Megri. Around the river valley, it's quite lush, some big trees as you can see there, but behind that it's dry, rocky, bare hillsides with juniper bushes. The mountains you see in the background there is Iran. Those mountains are in Iran, so we're right on the border. These are the juniper-clad rocky hillsides behind Megri, just above Megri, and this is a good habitat for some of the specialities. Levant sparrowhawks, they breed in the orchards around Megri. They can be quite shy, but that's where they breed. Chakars is quite a common bird in any rocky areas really throughout the tour. Black francolin, just in the southern part of Armenia, it's the sort of edge of its range. This is actually on the border fence, the Armenian Iranian border fence, taken in the early morning, a male black francolin. And then eastern rock nuthatch, you get both occur here together, but you can see there how the supercilium broadens behind the eye. And it's a bigger bird as well. But their calls are surprisingly similar, and they occur in almost the same places. Red-tailed wheatear is one of the top targets down here. It's not one of the most striking-looking wheatears, but its breeding range means it's a difficult bird to get. It breeds really from extreme southern Armenia through northern Iran into Afghanistan, and that's about it really. So it's quite a hard bird to see, but reliable in extreme southern Armenia. So there's a number of pairs breed around Megri. Somber tit, another tricky little bird. Again, a little bit of an outpost here. That's the only part of the tour where we can see it. And don't usually see more than one or two pairs of this rather large smart tit. Menatries warbler. That's a nice little Sylvia warbler that likes waving its tail from side to side. and that's reasonably common in Armenia, in southern Armenia. And eastern Orpheum warbler in those valleys behind Megri, very easy to find Orpheum warblers. With their pale eye and their dark head, very distinctive. The bird on the top left is a juvenile with a dark eye. An Upchur's warbler, a beautiful warbler, Hippolaeus warbler, large grey warbler, quite a late arrival in Armenia, here in a tamarisk bush. Black-headed buntings, they're singing away as well in any bushes in the area. This is a male, but it's still got a few pale fringes to its plumage, which will wear off as the breeding season goes on, and it'll eventually look blacker headed and smarter like this bird here. This is a group. We're looking for snowcocks. So from Megri, we climb up into the higher mountains, or we drive most of the way actually, and then go and look for some Caspian snowcocks. And these are a bit harder to see than the Caucasian, but if you're prepared to put the effort in, the rewards are there. I didn't take this photograph. This was taken by Vasil, an Armenian ornithologist, and he kindly sent me this wonderful photograph of a Caspian snowcock. There's our intrepid group on our way looking for snowcocks, not on the sunniest of days. And then finally, our final destination on the tour is usually Mount Aragats, which is this great big mountain to the northwest of Yerevan. And again, there's a road that goes pretty much to the top. We'll start off at the bottom slopes, and we'll look for things like this rufous-tailed scrub robin, or Rufous bush robin, as it's also known in Britain, although it doesn't occur in Britain. But this is a nice little bird. Also around the base of the Mount Aragats, we'll look for bimaculated lark. This is quite closely related to the calandra lark, with a little bit smaller, and various other differences as well. But bimaculated lark is also a species that arrives fairly late onto its breeding grounds in Armenia. Woodlark, that's there all the time, and we always see a few of those. Beautiful song, one of the most beautiful songsters of all the larks, really. Woodlark, and that occurs very high up above the tree line. Also Siberian stonechat, a very smart male there, a different race as well, pretty much confined to the Caucasian area. So that's Siberian stonechat. And the delightful white-throated robin, beautiful, beautiful bird. We probably will have seen it already before we get to Mount Aragats, but Mount Aragats is a very good place to find it, up in the juniper zone above the tree line, which is just a rocky area with rocky boulders with junipers. White-throated robin there's usually a few up there, together with blue throats, and this is the race Magna, which has not just a blue throat, but it doesn't have a spot. The races in most of Europe have either a red spot or a white spot, and this one has no spot. It's just a blue throat. So there are plenty of those breeding up in this high area. Quite a shy bird, but sometimes they show quite well. And the Rad's accentor is one of the top targets up there. Rad's accentor, well above the tree line and the rocky slopes. So that's a top target there. I didn't mention much about mammals. We don't really see very many mammals on the tour. This is a least weasel that was up on Mount Aragats a couple of years ago. But we can find wild goats in Armenia, which are the Bezoar ibex. We can see the East Caucasian tur, which is another ibex type thing around Kazbegi. And brown bear can even be seen sometimes in Armenia, though I've not seen one myself there. But so mammals is not so much a thing to look for in Georgia or Armenia. But I will finish on that, and thank you very much for listening. This is a final shot of a Güldenstädt's Redstart, which is one of my favorite birds. Thank you.
Fabulous, Nigel. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. Lovely image to finish off there as well. So certainly gorgeous, gorgeous bird. But yeah, very, very informative. Some lovely photos. We've certainly had a fantastic time virtually touring through Georgia and Armenia. So yeah, just quickly before we go off to our Q&A with Nikki and Nigel, just wanted to quickly remind everyone that our next dream destination webinar is to New Zealand, the land of the long white cloud, home to a wonderful assortment of unique and endemic birds, includes 5 unique bird families as well, and a whole host of other specials. And ever popular Rockjumper leader Eric Forsyth will be presenting that one. And yeah, we invite you to join Eric for what promises to be a fabulous overview of this scenically spectacular part of the world in a couple of weeks' time. One other very important item to note, though, is that this webinar will actually be held on the 11th and the 12th of May, and that depends on where in the world you reside. Some of you are probably shaking your head now and wondering what on earth is Keith going on about, but Eric being based in New Zealand changes things up quite dramatically here. And so to allow the maximum number of people across the globe to actually access and tune in to the webinar live, he'll be presenting on the Wednesday morning his time, which will actually be Tuesday afternoon, evening, in places like the USA, the UK, and South Africa. So please do take note of the change in the day of the week and the time. It was also on the webinar mailer sent to you earlier today. But just please take note of that and remember that for 2 weeks' time. When you tune in, again, the reminders will be sent through to you by email as well, so you'll be able to pick up on that on the start time too. Also, just a reminder that all the webinars are recorded and can be viewed later. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this now, so usually within the next 24 to 48 hours, you'll have the link available. But you can also view any of our previous webinars from the website, as well as on YouTube as well. And then, yeah, just finally, the webinars again are being offered free of charge, as you're fully aware. The leaders put in a lot of time into these webinars, and yeah, they're very obviously passionate about the destinations and places that we visit. But yeah, if you do want to donate towards those tour leaders and our NGOs as well that we support, our GoFundMe link is still open. And yeah, on that note, Nikki and Nigel, Q&A time.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks. Very first question made me giggle because we were just talking about it before the webinar, and it's about the birding guidebook. So Nigel, from your perspective, what is a good birding guidebook for Georgia and Armenia?
Oh, that's easy. Well, the Collins Bird Guide. It covers all the birds. It's fine. It's perfect. There is actually a dedicated guide to the birds of Armenia, a field guide that was published a number of years ago. But the Collins Bird Guide is all you need.
Oh, great.
And it's available as an app too, of course.
Oh, wow. Yes. And what is the highest ever height reached on tour when you're traveling?
About 2,000. The very highest I've ever been on the tour is about 2,500 meters. But we can drive to 2,300, 2,400 even. You don't have to climb. You can eat. The snowcocks are the highest things. The Caucasian snowcock, we can drive to a spot where you can see them pretty much from where you park. The Caspian snowcock, we do normally have to climb only about 100 or 200 meters in altitude from where we park the cars, depending on the snow.
And in terms of walking, how strenuous is this tour?
Well, it can be as strenuous as you want, really. Mostly it's not. Mostly it's not strenuous. As I say, on those slopes around Kazbegi, we usually drive and then get out and walk a little bit. There have been times when I've climbed up high and the slopes are very steep, but you don't need to do that. So generally generally it's no more strenuous than most of the tours we do, quite frankly.
Oh, great. We are getting to the end, and I know we ran over with our time, so I can see nothing else. There's no other questions. If anybody that's still online, and there's plenty of you still online at the moment, if you have any questions, please do ask us now. But other than that, we're all wrapped up, and thank you so much for joining us and helping the team out. And just to mention, if you do want to make a donation to Nigel directly, just drop us an email at info@rockjumper.com, and when you make your donation on the GoFundMe, just let us know if that portion is to go directly to him, and we will make sure that that's transferred across. But from all of us, from the Rockjumper team, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Nigel.
Bye.